Let's get started. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Doing good. It's Wednesday afternoon. Thank you for coming to today's cybersecurity seminar. I'm Dr. Stam. I kind of run these things, which is kind of cool. Maybe you've seen me before at one of these things. Yeah? No? Yes. I'm tired, can you tell? Okay. Anyway, this is not about me. I'm excited today to welcome back to campus a 1984 electrical engineering alum, Charles Snyder. Charlie's the executive director of cybersecurity at CAI, where he focuses on governance, risk, and compliance. And he's going to talk to us today a little bit about cybersecurity chaos. It should be fun. One thing you might not know about Charlie is that he is a winemaker under the label Chuck Thunder, which is a moniker given to him by Radio Shack, which is really interesting. But
do these guys even know what a Radio Shack is?
Well, if you want to learn more about
you'll stay up to, I will talk to you back.
Stick around for the end of the talk, but for now, let's turn it over to Charlie for some information about incident response. So please help me welcoming Charles Snyder.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stam and Rose Hultman, for welcoming back this mediocre student. I got, the old joke about what do you call the man who graduates last in his class from med school? Doctor. So I got through Dr. Voltmer and Dr. Hoover's classes, and thank you, Dr. Freud, for all the help you gave me on my homework. But that's what we're here today to talk about. We're talking about cyber incident response, where theory meets chaos. You're going to learn about cyber incident response planning and disaster recovery planning and these type of things in the textbook. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the textbook stuff, but also kind of give you some idea about what I've seen in my 20 plus years experience of what happens in the real world. So a little bit about me. Yes, I graduated in 1984, BSEE. My main focus was hoping to go into nuclear power, but nuclear power industry, I don't know if you noticed, kind of died about that time. I actually worked at a co-op at I don't know what people remember, but down in southern Indiana, there was a plant that was about 50% complete, but it went belly up around 84 and we never finished it. So then I worked in the automotive industry for several years, started studying my MBA at Eastern Kentucky University, and later I started collecting all the acronyms you see up there. First one was the PMP, the Project Management Professional. Got to work for Humana in their IT PMO. When Sarbanes-Oxley hit, they asked me to move over to internal audit. So that's when I really started getting into cybersecurity. I maintained active membership in ISACA, PMI, IEEE. I joined IEEE sophomore year at Rose Hultman. So I've been a member ever since 1981. So today, my agenda is really a 7-part presentation. We're going to talk about what I think is the life cycle of incident response. It's not an individual action, it's a life cycle of activities. Next, I'm going to reintroduce you, for those people who know the NIST CSF, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. For those people who are not in cyber, I'll give you a brief overview of why I think the NIST CSF is a great framework to talk about incident response. I've got 2 war stories. Some of you may have heard of these. They were in the news. I think we sent out some articles that we wrote up ahead of time that you may have read. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI and what are some of the impacts that artificial intelligence, good and bad, is going to have around incident response. Then I really want to spend a good chunk about some practical career advice about someone who, like me, who started in a completely different field. What are some of the things that you can do starting today to prep you for industry? And last, we'll have a short question and answer period, and I guess then there's a longer question and answer period later then too. So first, let's talk about the incident response life cycle. Preparation. Before the day of bad stuff happens, there's a lot of stuff you need to get done first. Any organization needs to be prepared. So there's a lot to this. In any cybersecurity assessment or cybersecurity plan, there's a lot of things you need to have done ahead of time. But let's focus on getting an incident response plan documented and approved. Your incident response plan needs to clearly define roles, responsibility, triggers, communication plans, In your incident response plan, you also need to maybe have a general part, which, here's how an incident is called, but then also think you need about specific scenarios, such as a DDoS attack is going to be a different action item than a ransomware, or a different action than a full-blown data breach. You're going to need to build the incident response team. It's not just technical team. It's not just going to be your analysts and your help desk people. Depending on the industry you're in, you're going to need to have incident response team or CSIRT team members from legal, communications, HR, public relations, to name a few. You need to deploy and make sure your monitoring tools are working, SIEM, SIEMs, or EDR, endpoint detection response systems, making sure you have backups and making sure you have good forensic capability to see what happens after the fact. And most importantly, in my mind, is tabletop exercises, because this is what you can use to train the staff and test your incident response plan. When you do a tabletop exercise, you can do it one of two ways, purely technical, but I also suggest you look at doing tabletop exercises with the executive team and other ancillary contacts such as PR, HR, and so forth. This is where you find the gaps. I found one time when I was doing a tabletop exercise, the first question I asked everybody as we started was, all right, do you have a copy of the incident response plan? The CEO goes, I didn't know we had an incident response plan. So, which of course the CIO that was there kind of bowed his head and like embarrassed. But that was what they're saying. We need to communicate that we have an incident response plan better. So detection. So this is the first active thing that's going to happen, is how you're going to detect. There's four main ways you detect something going wrong. One, your tools, such as your EDR or your alerts or your SIEM, is going to tell you that something's wacky and not operating properly. Next, you might get user reports from your employees or staff. Hey, I can't log in today. I got a blue screen of death. You may also get third-party notifications from vendors or the FBI or CISA. I've been involved in incidents where it was CISA who first notified the company that they were having a breach. And of course, worst case scenario is you pick up the news and you find out that your company or your state and local agency is in the news because of an incident. So you have to triage that initial thing. Now, one of the things that people are just starting off in this field get confused on these terms. Let me kind of clarify. You might get thousands of alerts in any given day or time. Those are going to be identified as hundreds of events, which may actually come down to 10 incidents. And then there's non-incident investigation and problems. Show of hands, how many people are familiar with ITEL? Okay. Okay, so that's where you get into problem management. It's the IT infrastructure library. It's another framework that you'll probably get exposed to. Alerts just says something is not normal. It could be an alert saying that, okay, I got a failed logon attempt from London, England, and the credentials are for the CFO. Now, is that an incident? Well, it depends. If you find out that the CFO is in a conference in London, it's probably not an incident. He probably just forgot his password. But at that point, if he's not in London, you might have an event. And if you investigate it further, you might say, hey, we've got multiple ones of these. We've got multiple high-level employees failed logon attempts. Even if they don't get in, I would say that's an incident because you look like you're under attack at this point. So when you do this, you're going to be doing a triage through a plan that's developed in your incident response plan. And there are going to be some checklists in there that you're going to be able to determine, is this an incident, is this an event? And then, of course, some things that are not incidents you might still need to investigate because maybe it's a bad sector on a hard drive or a network switch that needs to be replaced. As this detection process goes on further, you need to assign a criticality to it and escalate it to the right team. So at this point, if it is an incident, you're going to have someone determine that the CERT, or the Cyber Incident Response Team, has been activated. What you see on the right is an example. You won't be able to see it. I've mapped out the names, but this is from a client that we developed this detailed flow chart, and this is part of that incident response plan, and we determined you look at these conditions, if those all meet, that's a low-level risk. I don't know, password reset on one system. If it meets these other criteria, and maybe it's a little higher risk, we're going to make that a moderate or a high or a critical. I think in this one there's actually a black one, which was like, in that case, this was a transportation agency. This is like a terrorist attack. So that one's black. And at each level, you're probably going to have a different level of management involved. And there are going to be different actions that are going to be defined in your incident response plan. But at this point, what becomes very critical, and I'm going to harp like your professors do at you, document, document, document. Because you have to ensure chain of custody. You need to have very good best practices of documenting detailed tasks. What did you do? What was seen? Screenshots, date, timestamp. Because that's going to become crucial, A, in solving the problem, and B, recovering from it or engaging a forensic specialist like we have over here to help you identify what the root cause was. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to harp on it a couple times today. Focus on good documentation. And follow the plan. You create a plan for a purpose. Don't jump ahead and get ahead of yourself. I was doing a tabletop test once at a time, and I had some managers, senior managers in there, and we had a scenario we're walking through. At one point, we talked about something was happening on one of the networks. I can't remember the detailed situation, but something anomalous was happening. He immediately goes, shut off the internet to the whole company. And I'm like, yeah, you just, I'll get to that in a minute, but that's probably overreacting. And, your sales department might get a little annoyed that you just shut down the entire web ordering system. So sometimes you got to follow the process. And containment, eradication, and recovery. So I'm going to show of hands. Any mechanical or electrical engineers in here? Oh, great, good. So you're working at a factory, and an injection mold machine hose breaks, and it sprays hydraulic fluid all over. Well, besides safety, what's the first thing you got to do? You got to stop the leak, right? You got to short-term containment. You have to put that pig log stuff down on the floor so it doesn't spread. You put down the desiccant to get the material. So you have this short-term stuff you got to do. So the same way in cyber, you're going to have to isolate the affected systems. You may have to change credentials, reset MFA, reset different ports and stuff. Those are the short-term things. Meanwhile, you need to start thinking about what are the long-term containment? Is there something bigger? Do we need to change, update patches? Do we need to change configuration to our firewalls? We need to contain this from spreading any further. One of the things you want to do in an incident is if it's isolated to one system, if you can contain and isolate that, you can minimize the impact to the organization. While those are going on, then of course, after you start to eradicate, remove the malware and the threat access. This is a mistake that I've seen before. There was a small health agency near where I worked, and they didn't have a cyber contact with us, but we did their financial audits for them. They got hit by a ransomware attack. They did not tell us this. If I'd have known about it, I would have drove over there and given them advice. Well, they had good backups. So they just reset the computer, backed up and restored everything. And guess what? Was the malware gone? It came back and they doubled the price of the ransom. And they infected more systems. So they were down for 10 days after that. So when you do eradication, you need to look for all the IOCs, and you need to look at all the persistence and make sure, and then you restore from a clean backup. People like to skip this step. It's kind of like open your grades at the end of the semester. No one wants to really open a grade. But you got to do a lessons learned. Now, one thing I attest to from my time at Rose-Hulman is my professors hounded on us on critical thinking and asking the 5 whys. So that's what you're doing in a root cause analysis. You're not just going, well, We had malware installed because someone clicked on a link. Well, why did they click on the link? Did we have appropriate training? Did we have the appropriate DLP controls in place? Well, once they clicked on the link, why were they able to transfer the network and get onto a different part of the network? So it's why. You're going to do a root cause analysis. You're going to have document, timeline, and actions. Now this one, I'm going to comment about the documentation. There is strategic points in time where there's, I don't want to say two sets of books, but you might want to think about what is it you're going to share with regulators and forensic people. So you need to avoid, I say good documentation, speculation in this place, your documentation. Or if you go through a process and people start throwing out wild ideas, you got to be careful about what you put, because that's a discoverable record. Just, to be careful about what you put in there. It has to be true and accurate. Identify what worked, what didn't work. Then you need to go make action plans. One of the things you need to update your incident response plan, your DRP, your BCP. Now, when you create tasks out of an action, lessons learned, I did some audits a few years ago. They were doing their tabletop testing, doing their instance. They wrote up a nice lessons learned. I said, all right, where's the task log that people followed up to see if these got done? Nothing. They create this nice little task list for 10 things to get done. Nobody followed up on them. So guess what? Of course, I failed them in the audit because they didn't remediate the actions they were supposed to. Any action items you put in a lessons learned should be SMART. Anyone heard the acronym SMART? All right, specific, measurable, actionable, relative, time bound. The other thing, it's a personal line of mine, you do not assign tasks to departments or committees. You assign them to you or you. And you go to an accountable manager or director or supervisor. They may delegate the responsibility, but it needs to be somebody who's accountable for action, that you can hold accountable, because committees don't do any work. It's people do. And then, of course, you have to be prepared to share this information with your forensic analysis team. Our company uses a company called Surefire that does forensic analysis. So then they'll take whatever report you've got done at this time, or they help you create that lessons learned at the end of the report. One last thing, I added this after I prepared this slide presentation. I shared it with my team. They said, we probably need to add this in. And it was good feedback. Continuously updating this. It's kind of a given. Anyone heard of the Dr. Deming Plan, Do, Check, Act? It's some of the same idea. We prepare, we detection, we contain, eradicate, we conduct our lessons learned, and we make improvements to our plan. But also, meanwhile, you've got risk assessments that are going on. You've got a HIPAA security audit going on. You may be doing internal or external vulnerability scans. All those things will tie into any issues that tie into the incident response or any of these systems should be updated. So it's really a change management issue. SDLC, if you're making changes to the software, applications, you need to ask a question. What's the impact to the incident response plan? All right, a word of caution, the hero to goat syndrome. We got some very smart people in here who are very eager to go out and show the world all the things you can do. And there might be times that you have to take heroic actions. But be cognizant of the fact that what you don't know, you don't know. And I've seen situations where people try to be the lone wolf and try to go out and fix something without following the process and made this process worse. They literally shut down the company for a week because they took an action after, which was probably appropriate at first. After we gave them some feedback and say, hey, this is no longer a risk, you can open things back up, they insisted on shutting the internet down for a long time. That person was a contract employee. Their contract was not renewed. Let's put it that way. So another acronym for you, a CLM. Anybody know what a CLM is? You probably do. A career limiting move. So, and by the way, if you're ever going to take the CISSP exam, this is a good piece of advice. If one of the answers falls in that CLM category, you eliminate that. Because there are questions on the CISSP that'll be like, There was one like that, and of course I'm not allowed to tell exact questions. One was, one answer was escalate to the CERT team, or the other one was shut off the power to the server. Well, that's a CLM move, so you want to avoid that. Any questions about the life cycle before we proceed? Quick questions. Okay. The NIST CSF, that's my favorite framework. I play in this a lot, and I'll tell you why. A couple things I like about the NIST CSF. One, it's free. The government's already paid for it. You don't, unlike high trust or some of these other things you got, or ISO. Oh my goodness, ISO standards are expensive. I can go out there and download this for free. The other thing is, a lot of other standards here at the university, you got to worry about FERPA. Or if you're dealing with the payment card industry, you got PCI DSS. If you're in the defense industry, you have to worry about CMMC and 800-171. Guess what? There's a cross map of every one of those back to the NIST CSF. The other thing I like about the NIST CSF is, no offense, managers and executives out there, it's simple. I can explain to a board of directors, a manager, a marketing person, well, our gap is around recovery. We got governed, we got identified. I can explain it very simply. And let me show how that works in incident response. So we got our 6 functions in the cybersecurity framework, and then there's categories and subcategories if you're familiar with it. I can talk to a client's executive team about, hey, you've got weakness. You don't have a CISO established. You don't have good policies. You really haven't established the governance policies and procedures to ensure that there's a culture of cybersecurity here. Or I can say, you haven't identified all your assets, which unfortunately, I find that a lot. Asset management is a challenge, especially in healthcare. That's just an area that you think would be better by now, but isn't. Not only identify your assets, but identify your data, data classification, identifying your risk. Protect. Do you have the controls in place to protect your network and data? Detect. Are you able to find when something's going wrong? And obviously respond. Can I respond to an issue? And can I recover? See how it's very simple. You can categorize your findings and your recommendations in one or more of those 6 categories, and you can get your point across very clearly. Take a breath here. All right, war story number 1. CrowdStrike global outage. Some of you may be familiar with this, because this was a pretty big one. So what happened? Well, in 2004, we had 8.5 million Windows systems went down. The economic impact has been estimated to be over $5 billion. Boeing themselves had almost like $800 million worth of loss because of scheduling issues. Airlines, hospitals, banks were affected. It required manual, hands-on computer intervention. Was this a hack? Was this the Iranians? Was it the North Koreans? No. It was just a logical software error in the CrowdStrike application. To those of you who are not familiar with CrowdStrike, CrowdStrike Falcon is an EDR system, that is endpoint detection and response platform. To be effective, it operates at the Windows kernel level, which makes it good, but also makes it very exposed. So when they deployed an update in July 19th, it caused a logical error, and it basically got stuck in an infinite loop and caused a blue screen of death for these devices. The only way to fix it was literally go up to the machine, Control-Alt-Delete, and put it in safe mode. There was some other complications, as we'll talk about. Now think about this. Here on this campus, if you had to reset every PC and every server, how long would that take? Now think about somebody like a bank or Boeing or somebody else who has hundreds of locations. Physical access was required to update the machine. Oh, great, they have BitLocker. A lot of these clients have BitLocker, which I recommend. BitLocker's great. but the recover and safe mode, you need a copy of the recovery key for each machine. Geographic distribution. This has gotten worse from COVID. I work from home, which is great. But think about this, 20, 30 years ago, we had maybe 3 or 4 corporate locations, and you had probably an IT person in each location. It would be pretty easy. Today, remote office, if you're dealing with retail or anything like that, you've got hundreds of locations. How are you going to get tech staff out there to all those locations? Oh, and how is management going to prioritize that recovery? Does your organization have a good business impact analysis, or BIA, that clearly defines that recovery period? And, they had documentation gaps. Most organizations impacted by this didn't have. How are we going to get people out to these locations? So those lessons learned are even software tools that we depend on, Defender, CrowdStrike, Arctic Wolf, they can fail. And in this case, the more privileged the access was, the bigger the bug was. Risk management plans. At the governance level, have we really looked at our vendor criteria? What are our critical impacts of upstream and downstream vendors? We're talking about physical access. Not only access to the computer to do the work, but think about any large organization I've been to. Every facility has a different badge system or a key system. They're not standardized. It'd be great if they were, but I've done audits of other places where you literally, different badge systems, different key codes. Now you gotta get people in timely, fast, get in there, escorted, and get them access. Things like BitLocker could add complexity. And I bet no one actually tabletop something like this. So on one hand, you're on a realistic tabletop scenario, but I'm gonna challenge you, be creative in your tabletop exercises and go ahead and throw 2 or 3 scenarios at one time and see what happens. And I'll give an example of that as our next lessons learned. So mapping to the NIST framework, we got impacts around govern, third-party management, identify asset dependencies. For CrowdStrike mainly, did they have the appropriate stage deployment, testing, and rollback procedures? Detection, real-time monitoring, was this happening? Was there a way that you could have stopped it happening across all your machines? Respond and recover, dealing with all the manual intervention that was going to be required. Any questions on the impact of CrowdStrike? Okay. War story number 2, casino cyber attacks, MGM and Caesars Entertainment. Now this one, I have a little bit more personal knowledge with. The coincidence. We were engaged by another casino in Las Vegas to develop a tabletop exercise. So me and my boss, Rex Johnson, we were brainstorming and said, he came up with using ALPH-V as the ransomware payload developer. And I said, I want not just doing the back-end system, but what if they got into the back-end admin system and they were able to affect the slot machine servers? Now, it's pretty obvious now that slot machines are no longer mechanical. This is not Dean Martin of the day and a mechanical lever. All of your slot machines are basically computers. They're operating on servers. Now, they'll tell you that those networks are segmented or air-gapped. And anytime anyone tells me that something is air-gapped, I go, because there's always a connection somewhere. So I was feeling a little leery about, maybe this is a little too tight, getting both systems hacked at the same time. The day of our tabletop exercise, we were just starting, got about 45 minutes into it, when the CISO of this organization got a phone call from his buddy, the CISO at Caesars, and started explaining what happened. And guess what? ALPH-V ransomware was deployed on both their back-end systems and their slot machine. And I had nothing to do with it, I'm just saying. But unfortunately, I was staying at the ARIA, so I got my letter saying we got to give free credit reporting for a year because I got hacked. Now, MGM and Caesar were both hit within days. Now, it was interesting because the payload itself was not that technically challenging. It was use of scattered spider. Anyone heard of scattered spider? Okay, scattered spider is a group of recruited young or youngish US and European, Western European attackers. And because they speak good English and are familiar with the cultural norms, they make really good social engineering attacks. And then they, much in ransomware, it's all ransomware as a service now. There's websites you can go out and buy ransomware cheap. And they went out, and Scattered Spider deployed this against these two casinos by attacking social engineering to help desk. The playbook, is typical. I don't know the exact dates on this. They did open source intelligence. I can find out a lot about you. We've got people on our team who do this all the time, and they'll find out information. Of course, hopefully none of you are using your dog's name as your password, but you'll be surprised. They identified help desk numbers to these organizations. There's ways you find that out pretty easily. They called in as impersonating as employees, and they were identified through OSINT employees who were admins. So they called in as an admin that needed their password reset and had a new phone and needed their MFA tokens reset. Unfortunately, they did not have the proper controls in place. They were using just SMS as the MFA factor. And they were able to get VPN access, lateral movement through Active Directory, deploy to ransomware, bada doom, bada bam. The timeline, the best I could put together from open source information, the OSINT really got started just about a month before. And on September 7th, they attacked both locations. MGM, Caesars paid the ransom immediately. They didn't even think about it. As soon as they got ransom, they said, okay, we'll pay the ransom, $15 million. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's like a typical casino will get you anywhere from $900,000 to $2 million a day just on slot machines. That's how much money they make. So they made a calculation and say, let's just get recovered. Let's pay the ransom. MGM made account public a few days later. One of the problems here is that the PR team got ahead of the IT team and started announcing, we've got it under control, everything's good. Meanwhile, people are texting on X saying, I'm locked out of my hotel room again. I can't get my bonus points. I can't get into the club. So there were a lot of angry people because they're hearing one message, everything's fixed. And then if you've ever had any contractor work, just be like the contractor says, I'll be there tomorrow, and they don't show up. So there was a PR issue. And then it was confirmed that Alpha V, Black Cat, was the responsible party deployed by Scattered Spider. It took until at least October 5th for MGM to fully restore. $100 million loss. Yes, sir. I don't know. Usually, if you get the question was, how was Caesars paid the ransom, and they got the code to unlock it? How long did it take them? I don't know the answer, but it's usually pretty quick. Usually, it's it'd be hours, and we're going to depend on immutable backups. When you get into a complex situation, your RTO. There's a lot of fantasies in RTOs because when you have multiple systems, it's going to be days to recover from backups most of the time. But I think they were back up in a few hours. I don't know the exact number. Now, that's interesting. He brings up a good point. Why would the hackers give you a good decoding code? Because they're selling a service. These organizations actually have help desk tickets and 1-800 numbers. If you want to call them and say, I don't know how to do crypto coin. Oh, we'll call it. We'll step you through the process of how to set up your crypto coin and how to transfer it to us. They actually have very good customer service, these organizations. I don't have the numbers in front of me somewhere. I got it's like it's like the 10th largest business in the world right now. It's huge. So they had two different strategies. MGM, they refused to pay. The FBI says never pay the ransom. We're not going to pay the ransom. Took them 10 days. They lost about $100 million. It took that long to rebuild all their systems. Now, Caesars paid the $15 million, but of course, then they had to document that and tell the SEC that they paid the ransom. Now, the downside, this is what the FBI will say, they just got a big target on their head. Because I know they're going to pay ransom. So I'm going to go after them again with a different attack method because in the past they've paid. Now, I'm not going to argue one way or the other which is the best. But the kicker is that decision can't be made on the fly. That process needs to be built in the incident response plan. And guess what? None of the people in this room are going to make that decision. It's going to be made by the CFO, the legal team, the board of directors. You build your incident response plan, whether or not you're going to pay ransom, under what conditions, and then how are you going to get the Bitcoin? How are you going to think about the accounting issue? How are you going to account for that on your general ledger? All that is what you pay the executives to do, but it should be in your incident response plan. So let's look at the NIST issues with this one. Protect, they had weak MFA. You should limit what can be done in admin accounts. These admin accounts, they were able to, once they got in, they were able to escalate and give themselves more access and more capability. Training was obviously pretty weak. Monitoring traffic, how is it they were able to get across the network? Alerts, would you get an alert that a new admin account was created? That should be alert right away. Geo-block access, are these people calling in from Las Vegas or Athens, Georgia? Do you have any employees in Athens, Georgia? Pre-plan your ransomware scenarios. Test that incident response plan. Be prepared to engage public relations and legal counsel from the very beginning. And of course, if you're going to be, consider using cyber insurance. And then understand what your cyber insurance covers and does not cover. This is very important. And this will go back to my documentation point. If the cyber insurance company finds that you didn't follow your incident response plan and you made a mistake, they can deny the claim. I've seen it happen. So if you're going to use cyber insurance, you need to understand what it covers and doesn't cover. Oh, by the way, some cyber insurance companies have a timeline. You have to notify the carrier within X number of hours of an incident. Yes, sir. Yeah. That's true.
And then your cyber insurance won't cover it because of force majeure.
Yeah, and that's just like a classic property management, but most of us don't worry about bombs falling on our building. But that's a good point for those who couldn't hear. You want to make sure your cyber insurance does not have restrictive force majeure language in there, because if it comes down to that it's the Iranian Republican Guard or the Russia Fancy Bear or something like that, they can just claim, hey, well, it's war. You know, we don't cover war. All right, now about the elephant in the room. And I'm not talking about Rosie. I'm talking about AI. I almost got ran over by Rosie once. I was hanging out on the track at homecoming one time, drinking margaritas, and Rosie almost, anyway, long story. AI is a threat multiplier. Well, I could probably do a 2-hour presentation on this. Obviously, we got sophisticated phishing. The days of Nigerian prince or Russian cosmonaut are gone. You're not going to get. I did see one about a year or so ago. I said, I can't believe someone's actually fallen for the Nigerian prince, but you never know. They're AI generated and they're contextually aware, especially if they get onto your network and they're monitoring things. They're going to track the way you write your emails to you, and then they have AI tools that will automatically word it to the same wording. If you go by Chuck as opposed to Charles, they will too. So phishing attacks are going to be much more contextually aware and much more spear phishing. Deepfake voice and videos. This is going to get scary, folks. There's already been a situation where one CFO wired millions of dollars because he had a video call from the president of the company. It was video of his voice and everything telling him to do this, and he did. I want to add a side note here. There are companies out there that want to punish people who fail phishing tests. I am against that concept, because if you have fear, uncertainty, and dread, you're going to make your security systems worse. You want your employees to feel safe If they see something that's not right or raise an issue, let them raise the issue. Think about the company, when you'll get out there, you're going to get some micromanagers that are going to drive you nuts. The type that comes at you at 4:45 on Friday afternoon wanting to know where this report is that he asked you about to do next week. If you're in a culture that works like that, the likelihood for falling for a phishing test is going to be much higher because people have fear. I'm going to be in trouble with the boss if I don't get this email out right away. So that's just a little side note. As a leader, we want to make sure people feel safe in their operations and not operate under fear. Automatic vulnerability discoveries. Now you don't have to go through and manually read zero-day effects. They got tools that go out there and automatically find the vulnerabilities and create AI-assisted malware that adapts and evades the detection systems. Scaled attacks. I was reading the other day about one where it's like they launched an attack and it was just like thousands of systems they went after all at one time. In the old days, you had to have, and we're talking about skill level, we're talking script kiddie or less to deploy these tools. Before, you were thinking about a guy who maybe had the equivalent of a CEH qualification, someone with lots of years of experience to be able to deploy that. Not with AI now, anybody can deploy these. Speed. When I showed that timeline earlier, it's going to be compressed. I was at RSA conference in San Francisco earlier this year, and they were talking about the time that used to be dwell time of days or weeks is minutes. They get on the network, they identify what issue, and they deploy the package literally within an hour. So this is going to make it much more difficult to stop these attacks. But the good news is we've got some tools that we can leverage. As a defender, our XDR solutions now typically deploy AI threat detection and behavioral analytics. You're not having to have a person go through a SIEM log. I'm not a big fan of, depending on a human, just reading a SIEM log and finding an issue. But you can have tools that can look at behavioral analytics and look at those logs and determine ahead of time what's going to be done. All right, I've got to speed up here. I'm a little behind the schedule. So it's an arms race. So basically, the key differentiator, if you're going to use AI, use critical thinking. Some practical takeaways. Some skills you need to focus on, obviously technical skills, but framework and compliance, understanding of the compliance and frameworks. Keep your critical thinking skills. You've been taught critical thinking here, pattern recognition, root cause analysis, communication and leadership. This is what's going to take you from an entry level to an executive level. Do documentation, being able to report your findings in a fashion that the client or customer can understand and take action on. Executive presence. There's the old poem by Kipling about the man who keeps his head while everybody else is losing others. In incident response, there's going to be a lot of panicky people. The man or woman who keeps calm and follows the process is going to come across a lot better. There's a lot of different career paths just within this space here. You can read that. If you're not familiar with, how many people have read or heard about the NICE framework? Okay, I like this tool. It's free. Go out to NIST, type in any cybersecurity role you're interested in, and it's going to tell you the knowledge, the skill, and the behaviors that is expected by industry to meet that field. So you can look at the different types of fields that you can be in, from anywhere from an entry-level analyst to a CISO, what type of skills you need to develop in that area. How do you build relevant experience now? Well, join clubs and organizations. I believe we've got a past president of a cybersecurity team here in the audience, so that's the kind of thing we need. Join ISACA, IEEE, IS2. But don't just join. Don't just participate. Don't just show up to the meetings. Volunteer. Attend conferences. Quick side story. I moved from engineering to IT because I had volunteered to be an officer at a PMI chapter at a meeting to discuss things for officers. I saw on the whiteboard, hire 2 PMs. That's how I got my job. So be active and engage. And of course, there's all sorts of cool things you can do with, running TryHackMe, pursue the right certifications. B-Sides is a conference you can go to that's pretty cheap. Engage in those. Us recruiters love to see experience where, oh, I did this on my own. I set up my own Tenable server at home. Oh, I did this. I did a try hack me course on my own. That really catches the eye of people recruiting. So some key takeaways. Incident response is ongoing, continuous process. Social engineering remains one of the weakest links. We talked a little bit, identity is the new attack front. Even security tools can fail catastrophically. Framework knowledge and compliance knowledge also adds to your capabilities. Critical thinking skills matter just as much as technical skills. And it's a mindset. Anything in cybersecurity, part of it's a mindset. It's a long-term mindset that you're going to be there to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your patients, your customers, your employees' data. And AI is just going to make this all worse. And the extract I send out, there's a couple of links in there. Questions and discussions, and if you're a cyber paranoid, you won't scan the QR code. If you trust me, scan the QR code and it'll link into me. But if not, you can send me a LinkedIn. If you do send me a LinkedIn request, just put a note in there, say, attended the presentation, so I remember who you are. Any other questions?
Thank you. We got time for a couple questions, if there are.
All right.
I'm curious about regulatory compliance.
Yes, sir.
Especially in industries that have multiple regulatory oversight that conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you approach trying to get moderated compliance?
It's a good question. So people in the back end here, in industries that have multiple regulatory, so I'm going to use banking, you got FFIEC, you got PCI DSS, you might have California privacy protections, so on and so forth. One of the things we've done recently, we had a client and we created a custom questionnaire where we merged multiple frameworks. So we took a CIS, CIS control standard, mapped it to their company's business values, and then we also mapped it to a MISAC Excellence Award. There was a State of California had a MISAC State of California. So there was some overlap. So then we created a custom risk assessment, and having the flexibility to not just be a checklist auditor. So if you want to pick an audit firm or a risk assessment firm that doesn't just go through a checklist, and understand what's the real risk to the organization. I've done 853 assessments and just said, hey man, that control don't apply. Let's not even go there, and documented my reason why. I've seen issues where other companies have gone in and done, let's say, a HIPAA security assessment, and they're applying controls that they doesn't apply to them, and it loses credibility to the organization to say you're going to write up an observation. I don't know. Let's say you're not handling credit cards properly. We don't handle credit cards. Well, you don't have any controls for credit cards. Well, that's kind of a stupid answer, isn't it? So, yeah, and you still have to have the controls there. Of course, when I had a company did that once, and then the girl admitted that they made hard copies of every email with the credit card PAN number and stuck it in a drawer. And I said, okay, that's a problem. But one of the things I would say is look at a risk-based approach, and that is what is the risk to the organization, understand the inherent risk of the organization. And when I do these risk assessments, I look at inherent risk, which is the risk that you face on a normal basis. Then look at the controls, and then what's the residual risk, and then classify. And I try to avoid assigning high critical risks that don't really apply to an organization. Okay.
Yeah, one more question.
I was curious, how often are C-suite executives open to tabletop exercises? Do you ever have pushback on that?
We have in the past. It's getting better. Like we did one at I won't tell you industry, but we had one in the industry, and we did one the first year. We invited the C-suite, and none of them showed up. It was just all IT. Well, the IT director or CISO, he kind of had it out with them, and the next year they all participated. Now, I can't, as an external entity, make them. Now, if you're in a regulated industry, you can. Yeah, if you're in a FFIEC regulated industry, that might be a requirement. I think part of it is selling the importance of it. It's telling the people up front, This is not a tactical thing just for your IT tech nerds to do, but this is critical for your operations. And why, and I explained to them the value I've seen in it is that we found gaps. I did one earlier this year with a big construction company up in New York, and it was good participation by everybody. And by having the CEO there, he raised concerns about AI because they hadn't really got a good AI effective use policy. So I wrote that up as an observation that they did not have an AI. So he used that opportunity to raise a risk issue that he was concerned about.
All right. Please join me in thanking Charlie again. That concludes the cybersecurity seminar for today. If you still have remaining questions, he's going to be around. You can come up and ask him questions. And if you are here for CSSE 145, come back in about 10 minutes.